We have information about sales, net income, dividends, total debt, and total equity for this firm. Given this information, we need to first find out what is sustainable growth rate. Now, in order to find sustainable growth rate, I need two things. One, return on equity. Two, retention ratio. Retention ratio is pretty much easy. Let's get that first. Actually, let's get ROE first. For ROE, I'm going to use DuPont's identity, which means I'm going to need one, profit margin, two, total asset turnover, and three, equity multiplier. To get the profit margin, I simply take net income divided by sales. Next, I need to figure out total asset turnover, which means I'm going to need total assets and sales. Sales I'm given, total asset I'm going to figure out as total debt plus total equity. Then total asset turnover is simply sales divided by total assets. Next, I need debt equity ratio, which is total debt divided by total equity, which in turn gives me equity multiplier, 1 plus debt equity ratio, hence return on equity, which is net income. Actually, I already had return on equity. I don't know why I calculated all these. Let's do it anyway. Let's do it the other way as well. Profit margin times total asset turnover times equity multiplier. Same amount. And finally, retention ratio. I'm going to take net income minus dividends, which is the amount that I retain, divided by net income. Hence, sustainable growth rate is ROE times retention ratio divided by 1 minus ROE times retention ratio. Now I need to figure out new borrowing next year. For that, first let's figure out at this growth rate, what is going to be total equity next year. Take total equity now, and I do need to find new equity by growing total equity at the sustainable growth rate. Total debt next year. Remember that sustainable growth rate is calculated under the assumption that debt equity ratio is kept constant. So I'm going to multiply debt equity ratio with total equity next year. That is the total debt next year, which means new borrowing is total debt next year minus total debt now. If there is no outside financing, the maximum growth that we can have is the internal growth rate. And for that, I am going to need return on assets. Since I already had calculated assets, I'm going to take net income divided by total assets. Of course, that doesn't have a dollar interpretation, it's percent. And take ROA, multiply it with retention ratio, divided by 1 minus ROA times retention ratio.